Thank you for receiving me here, and I am a representative of the Karelian National Movement. It is a young socio-political movement whose goal is returning the sovereignty and independence of Karelia. Our movement's strive for independence of Karelia is lawful and legitimate according to all legal norms. It is in accordance with the Declaration of the Right of the Peoples of Russia, which was promulgated by the government of Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic in 1917. It guaranteed the right to self-determination for nations, including the right to secession and formation of an independent state. Relying on this document, the Assembly of Karelian people, following the example of other peoples of Russia, declared the independence of Karelia, which was recognized by Soviet Russia itself and Finland. The Tartu Peace Treaty of 14th of October 1920 between Soviet Russia and Finland in Articles 10 and 11 guaranteed the Karelians' right to self-determination and national autonomy as a part of Soviet Russia. However, Soviet military expansion, illegal occupation, and the following collectivization and repression did not allow Karelians to use their right to self-determination. The aforementioned international legal norms were subsequently violated by Bolshevism, and the rights of Karelians and other native peoples were reduced to a formality. The future Karelian state, for which we stand and for which we fight, is going to take its rightful place in the garland of developed democratic states of Northern Europe. In our opinion, independent Karelia must become an international example of cultural and national revival of North European minor nations. This includes the Karelians, Vepsians, Sami, and Pomors. Our means to achieve the set goals are as follows. Firstly, the restoration of national territories of Karelia after a long period of Russian colonization, creating favorable conditions for living for indigenous peoples and those who wish to return. This point and methods of achieving it are described in detail in our movement's official program. Secondly, the revival and stimulation of the national cultural process of self-identification of indigenous peoples of Karelia. The future Karelian state must become the main means of preserving the indigenous peoples, their northern culture, and spiritual ethical uniqueness. All methods of stimulating and developing the economy must be strictly in accordance with values of the indigenous peoples of Karelia, such as peaceful coexistence with nature and preservation of a favorable ecological environment. Thirdly, the ratification on a legislative level of the right of indigenous peoples of Karelia to the areas they have historically inhabited, and the right to use national resources on those territories. This includes the right of indigenous people of Karelia to traditional hunting, fishing, and other trades in the areas of historical inhabitants. Such areas are to be given the status of specially protected national and cultural objects. Fourthly, the restoration of the agrarian way of life, such as villages previously destroyed and abandoned by the regimes, as one of the parts of identity of indigenous peoples. Fifthly, administrative territorial structure of future independent Karelia must be strictly in accordance with the set goals, the preservation and improvement of living conditions of all indigenous peoples. The administrative districts will consist of various types. The first type is a national ethno-cultural autonomies with conditions sufficient for repopulation by indigenous peoples of Karelia, which underwent genocide during Russian occupation. In these regions, programs will be established for economic development, including various subsidies and harmonic integration of settlers coming to Karelia. Such autonomies will include the Pomor autonomy, Vepsan autonomy, and Sami autonomy. The second type is all Karelian administrative territorial districts. In these, systematic national domestic policy will be implemented for restoration of favorable cultural, infrastructural, and demographical living conditions. In all Karelian districts, we will implement policies supporting the development of a National Institute of Sovereignty of Karelian people as the guarantee of an independent, free Karelia. Sixthly, the foreign policy and international cooperation, especially with our democratic neighbors of the Northern European states, are most important for realization of our project and are vital for establishment of independent Karelia. So, in this address by the Karelian National Movement, we have presented briefly the main points of the project of revival of national and cultural identity of indigenous peoples of Karelia. These can only be effectively implemented in a free, democratic state, adhering to civil rights and liberties, with a high level of integration into the economical, military, political, and cultural processes of Northern Europe and the rest of the civilized world. Next, on behalf of the Conservative People's Party of Estonia, I would like to remind you, my dear colleagues, of the Peace Treaty of Tartu, the first one, the one between Estonia and Soviet Russia. On the 2nd of February 1920, Russia agreed to never lay claim on Estonian lands or people again in Article 2 of the treaty, a promise which they violated only 20 years later, and on the Estonian-Russian border in Article 3. However, even nowadays, though Estonia regained its independence 30 years ago, Russia continues to occupy 4.7% of Estonian territory. This is proportionally equivalent to a hostile country occupying the entire American state of California. Unless Russia proves its ability to adhere to international treaties, which includes returning to Estonia the parishes beyond the river Narva and the county of Petseri, the West cannot trust Estonia enough to the West cannot trust Russia enough to normalize our relations, excuse me. It is essential for all of us, the free peoples of Russia, the USA, and the whole Europe, to continue to demand that Russia plays fair and to never turn a blind eye to violations of international law if we are to forge a future of mutual cooperation and everlasting peace. But while this normalization of our relations has not yet happened and Russia continues to hold its territorial ambitions, the best way for the West to keep danger at bay is for us to aid Ukraine with as much as we can afford in its ongoing war, where it is defending the rest of us from Russian imperialism. Depending on whether Ukraine wins this war or not, Russia could be deterred for another 10 years at least, hopefully, or they will gain courage and perhaps even attack NATO in only a few. We owe our thanks and our aid, humanitarian and military, to the Ukrainian people for their great sacrifice and suffering, but I believe that Ukraine will win and become great again. Lastly, I wish to address any Russian colleagues listening to me. If you are people of integrity, please seek a quick peace with whatever terms Ukraine offers, and please return all Estonian lands to us. I am quite certain that the Russian people will benefit from the resolution and the diplomatic effects as much as your neighbors, the rest of the West, do. And if Russia takes the initiative in making peace with the West and disposes of Putin's murderous genocidal regime, then I will be among the first ones to forgive. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. This was an excellent speech, an excellent morning. Allow me to conclude this session. We will have now a lunch break. And in concluding, maybe the same like Montenegro.